Good morning, everyone. My name is Mighty Stream. I'm going to do your May the 28th spiritual principle a day in a meditation. If you need to reach me, feel free to do so at recoveryofhope21@gmail.com. Okay. The title of the meditation, Equality in Anonymity. NA has no classes of membership and no second-class members. The common denominator in NA is the disease of addiction. We are all equally subject to its devastation. We share an equal right to recovery. That comes from the book It Works, Tradition 3, Applying Spiritual Principles. Tradition 3, which insists that there's only one requirement for NA members, comes easy to some of us. We found recovery in NA, after all, and no one asks us about our qualifications. We may take for granted that everyone else finds it that simple. Maybe we'd lived a fortunate life with a tight circle of friends despite our addiction. So the ideal of not belonging had never occurred to us. If we shared a language and culture with others in attendance, fitting in may not have been a challenge for us. Maybe we looked around the room and saw faces that looked like our own. Or maybe our desperation had dulled our cynicism just enough to allow us to receive the warm welcome we found in our first meetings. Despite any outward differences, no matter the specifics, many of us unthinkingly assumed that others felt equally welcome. The disease of addiction tries to weaponize our differences to keep us sick. The fact is that barriers exist for many potential members despite our individual efforts to extend that classic NA welcome. Some of us struggle with accepting hospitality from members who seem different from us in all of the ways that society deems important. I constantly disqualified myself from NA, one member wrote. I got clean young, didn't use certain drugs, and I am transgender. My disease tells me that I don't belong, that I somehow deserve to stay separate and alone. Before we set aside our differences, as practicing anonymity would suggest, it may be helpful to recognize that identification may be a little more difficult to come by if we don't yet see other members like ourselves in meetings. Established NA members do well to emphasize our common disease. Regardless of the specifics in our experience, using brought us all to isolation, shame, and degradation. Identifying on an emotional level is often a good place to start. Our common path to a better life is summed up by the NA message. Any addict can stop using drugs, lose the desire to use, and find a new way to live. The disease does not discriminate. NA must not either. Recovery is precious, so I will strive to make it more accessible by emphasizing our similarities and taking no addict for granted. Let's take a moment of silence, followed by the we version of Serenity Prayer. Moment of silence now, please. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things that we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Just for today, please and thank you. This is a beautiful meditation, one that I know people will fall on different ends of the spectrum as far as their own experience. and their own ability to apply the equality in anonymity. It's not uncommon for certain cultures of people to live obviously within the same communities, neighborhoods, and that in itself will oftentimes determine the majority compared to the minority in a meeting. Okay, so if I go to a predominantly Latino, meeting, it wouldn't be uncommon for me to hear maybe Puerto Rican, Spanish, Mexican, Cuban, maybe even a little Brazilian, right? It wouldn't be uncommon for me to hear different dialects of English, but possibly a mix between Spanish and English or just Spanish. It would not be uncommon for me compared to if I went to a meeting on the south side of Chicago. Predominantly, the people in that meeting would be African Americans. Or if I went to a meeting in Charlevoix, Michigan, predominantly the people in those meetings will be all white Caucasian, right? White Americans are Caucasian. So our diversity, right? Our ability to be diverse, our ability to recognize the equality and anonymity is a challenge for some people. Because we know that when we say tradition 3, the only requirement for membership is the desire to stop using. That's just the easiest example I can give you is to talk about various cultures and race, ethnicity, right? As an example. So for me, people are still kind of, interested to find out that by far predominantly my family is of mixed race. So we have all races of individuals that come together for family reunions or gatherings. And it doesn't occur to us that those that are not, they've married into the family, they've had children with our, relatives, and they have mixed children. It never occurred to us that they may never or have ever felt uncomfortable because we've always done all that we could to make sure that everyone is welcome and feels welcome. So sometimes what happens is that, or has happened for me, I've been allowed to sit in on conversations with some of the women, Caucasian women that have married into our family, and heard their perspective and heard them express what it feels like for them. Okay, so I'm always amazed because I know that my family is very embracing and hospitable. However, from their perspective, they have a right to see it from their own eyes. And it was just amazing to me, somewhat saddening. But in general, that's just with a family. Can you imagine Narcotics Anonymous as groups placed throughout the world? How different that would be for, say, myself to go to a meeting in Charlevoix and be probably the only person of color in that meeting. And I would receive the same welcome. Generally speaking, I would receive the same welcome as if I had gone to a meeting on the south side of Chicago. What we don't think about sometimes is that not everyone is that comfortable blending in or practicing the spirit of anonymity and equality, inclusivity. Not everyone is comfortable with that. I'll never forget the time that I had a conversation with a man that had been in prison, and he was explaining why he had grouped off with this particular gang, right? And it was a white supremacy group. And he said that, coming into Narcotics Anonymous changed his life. First, he was uncomfortable being in the meetings with people of color. Then, as he began to hear and listen and identify that he also was an addict and needed to be there, he became more open to shares from people of color. Before he knew it, he had friends that were people of color. He never said his sponsor was a person of color, but he was just indicating how it was a process. And my heart just, it was amazing to hear that experience. And it endeared me towards him to hear his experience, and that he shares about it, but he doesn't share about it with everyone. Right? So here in this particular meditation, it is gently trying to approach some of the distinctions in cultures, race, ethnicity that exist, and remind all of us that not everyone is in the same place with the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop using. However, the fact remains that we're not interested in your race, religion, sex, creed, politics. None of that is of interest to us. What's of interest to us is that you have a desire to stop using and you're a member when you say you are. That's the only requirement, is that you have a desire to stop using to be a member. And then once within the fellowship and accepting your need for recovery and desire for recovery, surrendering to the process of recovery, all of the other things that you would find differences about yourself and others, now you're able to have an opportunity to practice the spiritual principles behind tradition 3, which is the same tradition that has you within the rooms being accepted. So it's hard to receive the acceptance and not give it. It's a given that no matter what your differences actually are out in the real world, that when you come in here, all of that is set aside. Does everyone do it perfectly? Absolutely not. But the disease of addiction does not discriminate. And NA must not discriminate either. And if you're a person that leans into discriminating based on whatever isms there are, then you're going to find yourself on the outs with people, because we're not going to accept it. We're not going to permit it. We're not going to accept it. And it's not going to be present in the atmosphere of recovery. That is an absolute right that everyone has. It's not to have to deal with discrimination within the rooms. Out there, that's a different thing. But in here, we make it a safe place to be. My name is Mighty Stream. I've enjoyed talking to you today. I hope you have a beautiful day on purpose. I intend to talk to you tomorrow.